Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program Working Wellness Healthy Solutions for Lawyer Wellbeing. For this webinar, attendees will be in listen only mode. If you need technical assistance, please submit your request under the Tech tab in the window on your screen. If you wish to submit a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A window on your screen. Erin Clifford will do her best to answer your questions. However, due to time constraints, not all questions may be addressed live during this webinar. To qualify for continuing education credit, please click on the verification pop-ups that appear on your screen randomly throughout the program. A link to the certification process will appear at the end of the program. We appreciate your participation in the short program survey as part of the certification process. Throughout the program, there will be polling questions that appear on your screen. Please take a moment to answer the questions as they are announced and appear. This presentation is being recorded. A link to the recording will be sent out to all registrants in the post-event email, but CLE credit is available only to those attending this program live. The presentation will now be turned over to Bob Clifford, founder and senior partner of Clifford Law Offices, who will introduce our presenter, Erin Clifford.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bob Clifford, founder and senior partner of Clifford Law in Chicago. We are now in our 18th year of conducting our CLE programs at Clifford Law, and we're very proud to once again present a quality CLE program, this time offering 1 hour of ethics credit in mental health and substance abuse, better known as the wellness credit. I'm particularly proud this year that my daughter Erin is today's presenter, using her multiple degrees, including her law degree from DePaul University and a master's degree in mental health counseling from Northwestern University, to provide some very valuable information in the next hour. You can read more about her bio on the firm's website at cliffordlaw.com, as well as to view today and print today's program materials. More than 2,600 lawyers, I believe, have registered across 4 states in what I believe to be the largest program of its kind in the country. Here at Clifford Law, we are committed to raising the quality of practice in our firm, as well as our colleagues in the state of Illinois, as well as other states. And wellness is among something that's become very important to our colleagues, and it certainly is a very critical part of advancing civility in the courtroom and in the practice. We encourage the thousands viewing us on the web to ask questions. Everyone is able and is watching, who's watching is muted, but we'll try to get to as many of those questions at the end of Erin's presentation to increase your interactivity. We will be asking a series of polling questions, so if you would participate in those, we would be grateful. So without further ado, I proudly turn the program over to counselor and behavioral consultant and expert, Erin Clifford.
Thanks so much, Dad. It is really such an honor to be here today with all of you. So thank you all for joining us. You know, nothing brings me greater joy in life than being able to share my expertise with the legal community, because I know how difficult it can be as lawyers to really get that work-life harmony and balance that we want in our lives. So I'm hoping today, maybe one thing that we go over is something that can register with you and maybe help you, make some shifts in your everyday life. So I purposely called this program Working Wellness, Healthy Solutions for Lawyer Wellbeing, because the real idea is we all know we're busy attorneys, but we all have different lifestyles, different things that are important to us. So given your circumstances, here are some ideas so you can make wellness work for you. So as we get started, I think it's important to spend a minute thinking about, what really is the landscape for us in terms of mental health in the legal profession. So last year, this statistic came out, and I found it really, on one hand disturbing, but at the other time, we're really not that surprised by this, are we? Recent data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that being a lawyer is the most stressful occupation in the United States. And why is that? Well, lawyers feel constant pressure, right, to perform at a high level, provide expert advice, make critical decisions, work under tight deadlines, and grapple with the constant demands of clients, colleagues, and of course the court system. And beyond feeling stressed out, we also know that lawyers also experience anxiety, depression, burnout, and show greater instances of substance use than the general population. And so you might be asking yourself, when we do these wellness presentations, we always talk about chronic stress and we talk about burnout. Well, what does that look like? How do you know if you're perhaps burned out? So here's some signs you might be experiencing. Headaches and other aches and pains. Perhaps you have some digestive or intestinal concerns, right? Sometimes we get that gut feeling in our stomachs. Changes in appetite, insomnia, or other sleep pattern disturbances, fatigue. You're just kind of feeling tired all the time. Maybe you don't want to get out of bed a lot of days. You're more irritable, frustrated, or moody. Perhaps you have some changes in your sex drive. You might also be increased susceptibility to infection. So maybe you're constantly getting that cold that's going around at your office. And also, inflammation in our bodies can be signs, so those chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, obesity, some cancers, as well as the mental health concerns, such as depression, anxiety, substance use, and eating disorder, PTSD. But I'm a very solution-focused counselor and coach. So while yes, we know we do have a lot of stress, we might be suffering, some from mental, physical, health conditions. But there are things that we can do to really improve our mental fitness, our physical fitness, and raise our resilience. So that's really what we're going to talk about as we go through this hour together. So now the next slide has a polling question on it. So I'm going to turn to our first poll, and I cannot see anybody's answers. I am also a very judgment-free kind of person. So please, I hope you'll all participate. And I believe your polling questions on your platforms are above the question section. So for our first question, you're sitting in your car in morning rush hour traffic on your way to work at your law firm. You arrive late and barely have enough time to make it to the courthouse for your status hearing. On the way there, you spill a cup of coffee all over your white shirt. So what do? A, you become so agitated that you get into an argument with opposing counsel in front of the judge. You're extremely frustrated, but you manage to pull it together to get through the hearing. C, you take a deep breath and shrug off your challenging morning. Or D, you are so emotionally distraught that you end up missing the hearing altogether. So thank you all for answering. So it sounds like, looking at our poll here, we kind of have a variety of answers, but we definitely have some people that, are acknowledging, at least I'm feeling frustrated. But it sounds like people are frustrated, but they're able to get through the hearing. And, and that's really, kind of the crux of what we're going to talk about next. And it's really that, how do we build that mental fitness? How do we build that resilience? And we're going to do that through a couple different avenues that we're going to go through in this program. And you can increase your resilience capacity by widening what's called the window of tolerance. You can also do that by setting flexible boundaries, as well as living according to your values, creating more work-life harmony in your life domains, and then practicing, intentional self-care. So when we talk about resilience and mental fitness, one of the things that I think of is really this quote. I think it sums it up perfectly. You can't always control circumstances. However, you can always control your attitude, your approach, and response. Right, so for some of you who answered, yeah, I would be frustrated, but I'd still get myself to go through the hearing, right? That is a form of having some resilience. And sometimes our resilience is a little stronger than other times, right? I can see even myself being in that situation and, being able to get through it, where some days I might be a little more upset. And so what is resilience? Resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stressors, right? So we all have some of these stressors in our lives. And I think of resilience for lawyers as almost like a superpower, right? It's kind of our shield that, protects us and can help us when we're struggling, to bounce back from difficult experiences and situations. And the great thing about resilience is it's something that we can all learn and develop skills in. And so how do we do that? So one way is by widening what I like to call the window of tolerance. So the window of tolerance describes the best state of arousal or stimulation in which you can still function and feel comfortable enough in stressful situations, right? One of my really good coach friends always says, life's not unicorns and rainbows. We have challenges ahead, but how are we best able to be comfortable enough to manage those situations? Because when a person is operating within their window of tolerance, they can effectively manage and cope with their emotions, the punches life throws at them, as well as just being able to rationally make decisions in the moment, right? When we get really emotional, sometimes it's hard to make a rational decision. And those who have a narrow window of tolerance may often feel as if their emotions are possibly just too intense or difficult to manage. So I'm a big visual person. So let's look at this graphic. So now this is our lawyer friend, Jim, and this is Jim's window of tolerance currently. So if you look at that optimal arousal state, for him, it's things like, when he's exercising, when he's meditating, spending time with his dog or his loved ones. I think those are a lot of things we can all relate to that kind of put us in that little, restful, chill state. But, there's also times where Jim gets really stressed out. For instance, he might get a bad verdict or ruling. Maybe he gets in an argument with opposing counsel, has an unexpected loss, and his stress levels get really, really high. When this happens, he kind of goes outside of that window of tolerance. But then on the flip side of that, your stress levels can also get too low. And so think about that. Jim's in court and he just freezes. Maybe you've experienced this when, your boss is talking to you, or maybe you're having a discussion with a family member or a spouse and you don't really know what to say. We would say you're kind of getting into that hypoarousal state where your stress levels are too low. We also put ourselves in this state sometimes. That's really what we're doing when we're numbing, with alcohol, with food, with just zoning out and binging, online shopping, that sort of thing. So the idea is, like Jim, how can we widen that window of tolerance? So yes, we're still going to have those ups and downs, but we're able to still stay in that optimal range where we can still function, we can still make decisions. And as you'll see on this next slide, right, we have the right side of it, which is what we just saw, but on the left side, if we're able to, again, to widen that window, we're still experiencing those ups and downs, right? Life can be challenging at times, but you're able to be in a place where you can actually emotionally, physically, spiritually control, what's going on around you. And so here's a few ways that we can begin to do that. Now, sometimes in the moment, we're just going to get anxious. We're just going to get stressed out. So what can we do? You can do some grounding exercises. So one of my favorite grounding exercises to do with people is the 5 senses exercise. Now, you're going to take a few minutes and just think about, okay, what do you smell? What do you taste? What do you hear? What do you see? What do you touch? And what is this going to do? This is a very mindful activity. If I'm thinking about these 5 things, I'm not thinking about anything else. It's also going to delay your reaction. You need to have a reaction delayed because you don't want to blow up or freeze. Breath work and meditation are also great things. But here's the thing about breath work and meditation, as I always like to tell my coaching and counseling clients, we don't want to just do this stuff when we get into these stressful or traumatic states. Because what happens is when we can regularly have a meditative practice or a gratitude practice, we're going to talk about a little bit later, we can actually train our nervous systems so that parasympathetic nervous system really gets that rest response. And so that can kind of be something we can tap into immediately when we get into these situations. Also, just having objects. Some people like to have a jewelry or piece of clothing that can be comforting. Smells, essential oils. Sometimes I'll have clients keep lavender, anything that smells good to them, in their desk drawer, or they have these things called lava bracelets where you can actually put the scent on. Music, anything that soothes you in the moment. And of course, over time, one thing that can be helpful with building resilience, with building mental fitness, is having supports and connections in our lives. Also practicing self-compassion, that positive self-talk. When something doesn't go well for us, whether it's in court or in our personal lives, Are we criticizing ourselves, or are we able to say, okay, let's learn from the experience and move on? And then, of course, self-care. Making sure not only are our basic needs met, but also getting in things into our routines like exercise, relaxation, nutrition. So all of these things can help us widen that window of tolerance and continue to build our resilience. And so we're up next for another polling question, and I want you to think about boundaries as we're doing this question. So Charlie is a busy trial lawyer. He's the father of twin 12-year-old boys. They are both very involved in athletics. But Charlie, he's struggling with his time management. He often gets caught up at the firm, and he routinely misses their basketball and baseball games. His friend, who recently became the president of their local bar organization, asked Charlie if he would chair the litigation committee. While Charlie's very interested in this, he's also concerned that he's not going to have enough time for his kids. So what should Charlie do? Charlie should agree to chair the committee. After all, he's doing it at the request of his friend, and it's a great career move. B, Charlie should decline the position and instead speak on a CLE panel for the committee. C, Charlie should tell his friend that he is unable to be involved in the committee this year and will instead work on his time management skills so he can attend more of his children's games. Or lastly, Charlie should just avoid responding to his friend because he feels too guilty saying no. So everyone feel free to answer, and remember, I cannot see who's answering anything. So what would you advise Charlie to do if this was one of your lawyer friends or somebody in your office? All right, we're starting to get a few responses. So it looks like we have people in different areas. We definitely have a lot of those middle responses, right? The idea of, Charlie could offer to still speak on a CLE panel, even though maybe he can't actually chair the committee. And then of course, some people that are just saying, you know what, he should just pass on it this year and, maybe spend a little bit more time, going to his children's games, getting better at his time management skills. So what we're really getting at here are boundaries. So I love boundaries. You know why I like boundaries? Because they're like fences. They keep out what you don't want and they protect what you value. So when we talk about boundaries, one thing that I think can be helpful for attorneys is to really kind of get used to realizing, when do we need to set a boundary? First off, you've got to know your limits, right? We're from the busiest profession, so you have to know, when am I taking on too much, not just professionally, but also personally. You need to listen to your emotions. A great way to tell if your boundaries are being violated or you feel like you need to set one is how you feel, right? If something is making me feel anxious, overwhelmed, depressed, it might be when I want that no button, versus if I'm getting excited about something. Also, listening to your body. How do you physically feel? If something is giving you that knot in your stomach, it might be time to kind of reevaluate that. And also, if you feel exhausted, that's okay to use your no button. It's okay not to go to something because you just need to rest. My therapist always likes to say, what you want is actually a boundary too. And then knowing your values. Does this decision align with my values? We're going to do a little bit of values work today. And then making sure that our boundaries are flexible. Because when we have porous boundaries, think about if you're draining the pasta water in a colander and everything runs out. You're going to get run over a lot by people if your boundaries are porous. But on the flip side of that, if we're too rigid, it can become isolating from others, which is also what we don't want to do. So here's a different kind of boundaries that we can think of setting. So as I'm going through all of these, kind of think about, is there one boundary maybe in my life that I need to set, or maybe I need to revisit a little bit? So the first one is, of course, time boundaries. Now, time is really your biggest commodity in life, right? We don't know how much time we have here. So we want to make sure we spend it wisely, doing the things that are important to us with the people that are important to us. And consider your life domains when you think about this. Also, one thing that can help with time boundaries is being realistic, right? How long is it going to take me to do this work assignment? And also being realistic about personal and professional commitments. If somebody asks you to, chair this gala or join this board, join this committee, figuring out how much time is it realistically going to take That should really factor into your decisions. And remember, you don't owe people an answer immediately. So that's sometimes a boundary we can keep with ourselves. Also, self-care boundaries, right? Don't let work and obligations get in the way of your own well-being and health. Build self-care into your routines. If anyone was here last year, we kind of went over some routine building. So these could be things like exercise, I like to call it mindful stress management, sleep hygiene, meal prep, and really being consistent, right? Consistent with our self-care can guard against burnout and stress. And I always like to emphasize, I know sometimes people are like, I'm way too busy to practice any kind of self-care. I firmly believe that we all have 5 minutes a day. Sometimes it's just that 5-minute pocket of self-care. You're definitely worth that. And then, of course, we have social boundaries, right? So before saying yes, ask yourself if the going to this event will impede on other things that are of more importance to me. For instance, I have, my friend asked me to go to dinner, but you know what? I've got a work deadline. Or maybe I'm really trying to get into that bedtime routine, get my morning workout in, and this is going to kind of hinder that. So maybe that's going to base my decision. I have stuff going on with my family. So really think about the big picture. Also, don't let FOMO or the fear of missing out get in the way and overcommit yourself. This happens so much with adults sometimes too, just like it does with our teenage kids. And then limit your number of social obligations per month. This is really a simple skill that you can do if you're like, I still want to be active. I'm busy at work. I've got my family, but maybe I still want to be able to do some stuff with my friends and socialize. Kind of deciding how many times a month would that realistically work for me. And then we have our emotional boundaries, right? Don't take on people's negative emotions, right? If you ever kind of get around someone, you're like, they kind of got bad vibes, right? You don't have to take those on. You're also not obligated to be somebody's sounding board. If you're listening to people around the office like gossiping and you just don't want to deal with that, leave that conversation, change that conversation. And also, considering if it is emotionally healthy for you to have relationships with certain individuals at this stage in your life. I do some recovery coaching, and sometimes when I'm working with attorneys that are in recovery from, substance use, there are certain relationships that, are no longer healthy for them to engage in, but this can also be, any of us, right? Maybe we're still friends with somebody from high school that's not serving us. So, thinking about, we only have so much time, who do you want to spend it with? Also, relationship boundaries, right? On the flip side, we want to surround ourselves with people who uplift our spirits, provide us with supports. And also, when you have to have those tough conversations with your partner, or close family members, sometimes it can be helpful to plan out what you're going to say beforehand, send a note as a prerequisite. And of course, again, remembering you don't owe somebody an answer immediately. And if you were in a crabby mood one day and you said something you didn't mean, we can always circle back. And material boundaries, right? Don't overextend yourself beyond your means. Plan and be mindful, of purchases. Amazon comes a lot to my house, and it adds up over time, as my husband John likes to tell me. And of course, enjoy your financial success. You all work really hard. Make time for that vacation, those travels. And of course, our professional boundaries, in the workplace, in our law firms, organizations. Be a clear communicator, learn how to delegate. And of course, identify your non-negotiables. If somebody wants to have some self-care during the workday, put that in your calendar. You're not owed to work 24/7. So, making sure you have, non-emergency work calls and emails, those set times. I tell a lot of people, put that in your email signage. Tell your team at the office, if it's an emergency, how to get a hold of you. You don't have to be on your phone looking at your email all night. In fact, that's not going to help your self-care. And also knowing your energy workflow. Some of us are really ready to go in the morning. Some of us have a little bit more energy later in the day. So when possible with work, kind of scheduling things when you've got that, your workflow, your energy's higher, and then maybe scheduling, tasks like returning emails, right? Working on some writings when your energy's a little lower. So all these boundaries are things that can really help us build our resilience as we go about our days. Because again, it's going to provide us with some fences. So now our third poll question is just kind of a statement. So think about what resonates the most with you here. When it comes to values, how have your values shifted over time? So I'm questioning what my values are at this stage in my legal career in life. I have the same values that I did in my youth, just like the rest of my family. My values have shifted as I've lived through different personal and professional experiences. And lastly, my values seem pretty incongruent to the way I'm living my life. And you might be asking yourself, why are we talking about values as attorneys? And and just looking at these responses, there's definitely a big number of people that feel like their values have shifted, as they've gone through different personal and professional experiences. And if that's where you're at, this makes a lot of sense. And values are just so important because here's why. When your values are clear to you, making decisions becomes easier. So at the heart of really my coaching program, when I'm working with lawyers and other professionals, is what I like to call values-based harmonious living. So it all sort of starts with, what are our values? Because at the end of the day, our values are really our North Stars that are going to guide our decisions, guide our actions, the way we're living our life. So values are the fundamental beliefs that govern our lives, and they guide each of our life choices. So everyone has a unique set of values based on their life experiences. So values shift as we pass through the different stages of life. And we also might develop values that are different from our families, our friends, and our colleagues. And I think a lot of people hinted at this as we were going through that poll, right? Life circumstances have changed your values. And I always think about this, like think about, our legal careers. You might have very different values when you're a young attorney starting off than when you're in the heart of your career or when you're kind of thinking of maybe winding things down a little bit. Also, life circumstances. When somebody is single, and on the town, kind of going out doing more stuff, they might have very different values, things that are important to them, than when they get married or they have children. Also, when children get older and leave the nest, right, go to college, that can also shift, values for that person, that family unit, as well as when we go through struggles in life. If we suffer a loss, go through a divorce. All these different things can really shift our values. So I always tell people that at least once a decade, you really kind of want to take a dive and look at what your values are and go from there, because you want to make sure that you're living a life according to your values. Because what happens when we're living a life that doesn't align with our values, our actions, our words, it really creates a lot of strife for us. I really believe that a lot of chronic stress and burnout comes from us not living according to our values. Because when we aren't living this way, life can sometimes get a little bit unfulfilling. So that's really why I think it's important to kind of start by recognizing what your values are and then kind of building out your life domains and your goals from there. So when you're thinking about values, here's a couple questions you can kind of think of. At this time in your legal career and life, consider where your focus lies, right? Who are you now in this day, at your age, who are you now? What life domains are the most important to you? How do you want to spend your time? Who do you want to become? Who do you want to spend your time with? Right? These are all questions that can kind of help us guide our values. And one of my favorite questions too to ask clients when I'm working with them is, what does success look like to you? Because success is going to look very different, for me and then maybe it does for a friend of mine or my colleague at the end of the hall. So it's really important, to think about, for you in this moment, what's really important to you and where do you want to go with your life? And so in everybody's packet that's included in the materials you can download, I actually provided you with my values exercise that I give to my clients. So I would encourage everyone, if you're interested in thinking about doing a little exploration here, to take this worksheet. It's going to guide you through it. So you're going to end up coming out with your top 5 values. It won't take you too long to do this, but I think this is a really good way just to kind of reconnect with yourself and get a little reflection going when you think about, what are some kind of shifts you want to make in your life, even if it's just in the self-care domain. as we think about values, and next we're going to kind of start getting into the different life domains. I have a little polling question here, and this is really a hypo of one of my clients who, for confidentiality purposes, we're going to call Jenny. So Jenny is a 42-year-old lawyer who is focused on making equity partner at her corporate law firm. She's married with 2 children, ages 12 and 14. She is extremely overwhelmed and anxious, trying to balance her personal and her professional lives. Further, she was diagnosed with prediabetes at her last physical exam. She knows that she needs to change her lifestyle so that she can be healthy for herself and her loved ones, but she feels like she's no time for herself. So what would you suggest that Jenny do? Maybe some of you feel like this sometimes. So first off, Jenny should stay focused on being a partner at her law firm. Her time is limited to achieve this career goal, and she'll have more time down the road to concentrate on her health. Secondly, while it's important to keep focusing on her career goals, Jenny needs to make herself and her health a top priority too. Next, Jenny should give up on making partner. The stress is clearly too much for her to handle. Or finally, Jenny should take a medical leave and focus solely on improving her health and spending time with her family. So if you were a friend of Jenny's, what would you advise her to do? So it looks like we have several different answers here, but a lot of you are literally in that kind of second domain where it's important to keep focusing on her career goals. Jenny really does need to make herself and her health a top priority. And so how can Jenny do that? So that's what we're going to talk about now. And I think a lot of us feel like that sometimes, right? We feel like there's so much going on. How can we find that word everyone uses, balance? Okay, well, first let's think about it this way. You can do anything, but you can't do everything, right? So we've got to make some choices here. And that's really where, when I'm doing my coaching with people, I really try to focus on what I like to call work-life harmony. So you might be saying to yourself, why are we not saying work-life balance? Well, I actually hate the word balance. What it really reminds me of is when I was a kid and my dad used to take my sister and I to the circus, and we would watch these acrobats walking on that tightrope, and they were dressed beautifully in sparkly costumes, and it was so fascinating, but it was also terrifying. And that's really what balance I think of, right? How do I kind of teeter and balance things? Like, think of that scale of justice. But when it comes to life, we don't want to feel like that. So I really prescribe to that harmony mentality. So work-life harmony is a blending of all your life domains in a way that personally brings you the most life satisfaction. So again, it's that what success looks like to you. This is going to look a little different for each and every one of us. So when we're going through these domains now, I want you to think about, what domains are most important to you at this time in your career and in your life. How can you find avenues to weave your domains together? And really, what does your ideal web look like? So this is my wheel of harmony. Some of you may have seen something like this before. We also have what they call kind of based this on a wheel of life, but I chose different domains. And I really chose these domains because from a psychological developmental perspective, we know as we go through life, if we want to find fulfillment in all our different life stages, these are really the areas that we want to touch upon. And it does not mean that you're a 10 in all of these areas at all times, right? That's not possible. But the idea is as you go through life, your wheel is going to shift. And so it's going to be guided by your values, which of course we've already mentioned change over time, but you're really going to be putting the focus into the areas at this moment that are really the most important to you. And a lot of this really just comes down to being mindful, being more conscious of where we're at and where we want to go. So let's go through each of these areas. So the first area is career, right? Something that as attorneys, we get in our own ways, right? Career is important probably to all of you in some level who are on this. So the concept of career and work, it holds diverse meanings though for different individuals. So career, it can be transactional for some people. They have a reasonable salary, they have health insurance. For others, career can really be a part of your identity, a part of, something that you're passionate about. I sometimes hear this with lawyers. And, when I think about career, I'm going to flip back real quick to our wheel. I really think the legal profession, and I talk about this a lot with different attorneys and even people who are attorneys in the wellness space like me, our profession spends a lot of time on this career finance domain. And I work with people all the time or talk to lawyers who are very successful. They have all the gold stars, all the great career accolades, and they'll say to me, I still, something's missing. I don't feel really fulfilled. And I would suggest to think about, what other areas in this wheel, could you build out to really get that fulfillment, right? Because we know we're not going to get all our life fulfillment just from our career. So after the career domain, we have the finance domain. So, finances a lot of times are, of course, connected to our careers, but other things can influence them. But finance really does, impact our overall mental and physical health. I mean, the reality is all of these different domains in this wheel kind of feed off one another. Finance also provides access to opportunities in life, and in unforeseeable life circumstances can also impact our finances, right? Like illness, divorce, if there's a recession, and on the flip side of that, some of you might be doing very well financially speaking. So, kind of just knowing, where you're at, where do you want to go? And then after we kind of move on from the career stuff, get into the people stuff. So here we've got family and friends. One of the things I always like to say is money and success cannot hug you back. No matter where you are in life, it's important that we make time for our family and our friends. And this could be, family, real family, chosen family, right? But the people that are important to you. And I know sometimes it can be difficult for attorneys who are so busy to be like, okay, like I'm on trial or I have this going on. I only have so much time to give. So one of the things I always suggest is how can you in the moment maybe just be more present? Maybe you don't have more days a week you can have dinner at home. But when you're there, can you be really present in the moment? How many times are we sitting with family and friends and we're all on our cell phones and stuff, right? So finding ways just to, even if we don't have that time, think by the number allotment, are there ways that we can spend more time with family and friends, checking in on people we haven't seen for a while, but just making sure we really build and attend to those relationships too. And then community. So some of you may have heard there's a lot of books on this. Netflix actually did, I believe last year, kind of a cool series on this about the blue zone. So the blue zones are areas of the world where people live the longest. They have the most centenarians. And, everybody always thinks about, what do they eat? What do they do to exercise? What do they do for stress management? But the reality is when you look at all these different areas and it's all about the community focus. And, we know now when we look at research, the biggest contributor to longevity is connecting with one's community. So, think about in your head right now, like what communities are you involved in? It could be your church community, your neighborhood, your school, recovery, health club, social club, professional association, an interest meetup group. And I really think community is a great place to kind of build out our life domains in. So for instance, I'm sure there's a lot of people on here that are involved in bar organizations. So perhaps you're involved in a bar organization that you really like, and it's helpful for your career. It's helpful for that personal development domain we're going to get into. You're really involved. It's part of a community. You're doing it with your friends, maybe even some family members like I do sometimes. So you're really hitting all of these different life domains by just being involved in this one community. So that's something to think about. And then of course we have our health. Your health is wealth. When we don't make time to take care of our own health, whatever we're, putting in front of that, whatever we're protecting is going to eventually fall by the wayside if we don't take care of our health. So just making sure you regularly go to preventative medical appointments, whether it's that annual physical, that dental cleaning, the mammogram, and this also includes your mental health, making sure we attend to our mental health and getting help when necessary. We all, as attorneys, have access to these wonderful lawyers assistance programs, and, just making, sure we can attend to that when necessary. And, there's nothing wrong sometimes with, just following up with somebody in your office. If you see somebody in your law firm that seems like they're struggling a little bit, just, asking them how they're doing. And, if they say, oh, I'm fine, kind of following that up. And then along with health is self-care. And I purposely made self-care its own domain because I think self-care is really about the stuff we're doing regularly on a daily, weekly basis. So incorporating positive supports into your routine, your lifestyle practices like good sleep hygiene, exercise, eating a healthy diet, practicing mindfulness, maintaining healthy boundaries. We talked, already about, I gave you some ideas there. Engaging in hobbies you love, in really using that PTO and vacation time. I think sometimes we're too anxious sometimes as attorneys to take vacations, but you really need to recharge and reboot. Just think about your phone. If it doesn't work, what do? We shut it off and then we, upload it again. You need to do that to your bodies. And in your minds, of course, as well. And sometimes, just doing nothing is self-care. If you're really busy, you feel exhausted, and just taking a break can be a great way to practice self-care. And then personal development. So we know that as we age, it's important to continue to develop new skills and initiatives that can have a positive impact on your life. This is also really good for brain health and cognition as we age. You may have read stuff, we always try to get people as they get older to do, puzzles and things like that, but also just learning a new skill can be helpful. And this could be, through professional development, through organizations, taking a class in an area that you're interested in, developing a new hobby, traveling, learning a new language, meeting new people, but all these different ways we can kind of personally develop. And I think really the idea is that we're always learning. As we age, as we go through life, we're always learning new things. And then spirituality. Spirituality means different things to different individuals. For some people, it's really a religion, a belief in a higher power. For other people, it's all about like kind of nature, the natural world, and in practices, meditation, prayer, music, art, gratitude, journaling. All these ways are great to get in touch with our spirituality. Contribution. How do you pay it forward in the world? Joining a philanthropic board or professional organization, volunteering for a cause that's close to your heart, mentoring others. From a developmental perspective, we know that as, we kind of go through middle adulthood, get into later adulthood, people who feel the most fulfilled and successful are those who contribute to others. So I know a lot of people, do that in the legal community when we mentor young lawyers. Maybe you're involved in things in your community where you mentor, but this is a really great way to contribute. And then finally, attitude. Now you might be asking why I made this a domain. I am a very big believer in the way we come into the world. If we have a positive attitude, a hopeful attitude, it really influences all of our life domains and can really be helpful to our mental health. So, are you able to recognize the positive things in your life? Or is the grass always greener on the other side? Is your glass half empty or half full? And really considering that voice in your head, if something bad happens, like if you got a bad ruling in court, if you got into, a fight with your spouse, are you able to positively talk to yourself and move past it? Or are you somebody who blames themselves? I can certainly relate at times to doing that, but I think the trick is to kind of just being more mindful of this and really tapping into gratitude, which I'm going to give you a few ideas of in a minute before we wrap up today. And so we're going to revisit Jenny a little bit just to give you an idea. So just like your values activity, I actually gave everybody my Wheel of Harmony activity. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in doing a little reflection, to do your values activity. And once you've got your top 5 values, to then come to your Wheel of Harmony and just kind of consider, where do you feel like you're at in this, in terms of satisfaction, in terms of your focus in each domain. And you're going to kind of string them together, create that little web. And then after a few reflection questions, even if you just think through them, what do you want your web to eventually look like? So you might remember Jenny. She was doing really great with her career, her finances. She was making some time for like family and friends, but her health was really struggling. And so, not surprising, she only scored like a 2 in those areas for herself. So after I worked a little bit with Jenny, we did some reflecting and we're kind of trying to build what do we want to maybe do for some SMART goals. Jenny decided that she wants her web to look a little bit more like this. So notice here, she's still pretty high, right, in that career finance domain, family and friends and community, but she's also giving a little bit more time to her health, to her self-care, and kind of trying to shift that attitude a little bit. And I really kind of want to bring out with, Jenny as the example. You can still be really into having the career, having the finances, but then also, how can I carve out some room in some of the other areas? And another thing that, I want to note too is, I work with people at all different times in their careers. And I do sometimes notice, as people kind of go through like, more towards getting towards the end of their careers, thinking about what they want to do next in that next chapter, sometimes that personal development, spirituality, and contribution does come into play a little more. And so for our final poll today, after we just went through the Wheel of Harmony, I am curious. So when you consider your values, when you think about those, which of the following life domains do you think in this moment you might want to allocate a little more of your time and attention? So is that career finances? Is that self-care and health? Is that family, friends, and community? Or are you more into like the contribution spirituality? So it looks like we've got people kind of all over the place here, which is great. There's definitely a lot of people in that self-care and health domain. And then, of course, the family, friends, and the community domain are always pretty high too. As well as there are some people, of course, who still are like, what, maybe I want to focus a little bit more on the career. Maybe I'm kind of more into the contribution and spirituality. But the idea is just to recognize that these are areas that, at times in your life you want to kind of touch upon. So for our last section together, I wanted to give you a few strategies. I love to give strategies for lawyers to use self-care to enhance these different life domains. So the first one, where we definitely had a lot of people chiming in here, is the self-care and the health domain, right? And this is always a big thing for lawyers. I often do, programs just in this area. So a couple of my favorite self-care tips. Having an exercise routine is really important. Why? Well, we know from a longevity perspective, exercise is actually the #1 thing that increases our longevity. And it's also, not only is it good for your physical health and preventing chronic diseases, but it's such a good mental boost for us that are in a stressful profession. So I always tell people, you don't have to overdo it. In fact, the research says we need to do 150 minutes of physical activity. And that could be set workouts, and that could also be things like taking the stairs, walking to and from the train station, gardening, swimming, right? Just being active in our lives. So I think one just trick, if this is an area anyone wants to build up, to schedule 3 exercise times in your calendar a week, and then just be active in your life. And if you haven't worked out in a long time, don't worry about it. Maybe walk for 20 minutes to start, right? You don't have to, go from 0 to 100, just getting in little pockets here and there. Nutrition, from a nutritional perspective, crowding in more of those healthy nutrient-dense foods like, your good lean protein sources like, beef, poultry, fish, beans, having lots of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, healthy fats, and having less of those ultra-processed foods, fast foods, and too much sugar. Mindfulness practices. Remember, again, meditation, breath work, journaling, prayer, all of these things, when we practice them regularly, really do help regulate our nervous system. So when we get into those stressful situations, our resilience can kind of kick in. And then, of course, sleep. We really need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. So just giving yourself some time to get that sleep in, get a good sleep hygiene going. And really, lastly, when it comes to self-care and health, making sure you go to those preventative medical and dental appointments. I know you're busy, but make time for those because that can really help you and your families in the long run. And then, of course, engaging, right, with family and friends in the community, whether that's, attending to existing and new relationships, activities with your colleagues, getting involved in different organizations, and of course, attending classes, workshops, and areas of interest. I always tell my clients, whatever you like to do as a child is sometimes a really great thing to return to if you're looking for something fun to engage in. And then contribution and spirituality. Again, supporting that younger generation, employers, law students, or maybe youth in your community, joining a philanthropic board. If you don't have time in your schedule for that, just doing a little volunteering, maybe attending an event once in a while, being part of an organized religion or community, and of course, finding spiritual connections through meditation, through nature, through the recovery community, through art, through music. And then finally, before we get into questions, we wanted to leave a little time for questions. I wanted to end here with attitude. This is one of my favorite domains. So if you're thinking, how can I improve my attitude a little bit? How can I get a little bit more of a positive perspective? Well, first off, you can take a gratitude break. And how do we do that? We can journal. Every day, write down 5 things that you're grateful for. Also, you can also create a gratitude jar. So, every day on a piece of paper, write down something you're grateful for and put it in the jar. And what's great about a jar and a journal? I'm having a bad day. I've got this jar, I've got this journal. I can go pick it out and look at something in my life I'm grateful for. Doing a walk or scavenger hunt. It's starting to be nice out here with this time of year. So going out into the world and really kind of just paying attention to the beautiful things around you, getting your steps into. I love gratitude scavenger hunts. So picking something you want to focus on, like in the fall, I love fall, looking for pumpkins, looking for a certain flower, seeing how many dogs you can find, but just something that's focusing on the present moment, having a gratitude trigger. Right, a picture in your workspace or at home. Many of us have screensavers that trigger some gratitude for us. And then next, one of my favorite attitude things is asking yourself, what interpretation choices do I have? For instance, I'm in a meeting and my boss walks in and he's in a bad mood. What do I initially think? Oh my goodness, what did I do? Right, a lot of us go there. Maybe it happens when our partner walks in the room. Or it could be a lot of other things. They could have just gotten off, they could go off on the wrong side of the bed. Their knee hurts, they don't feel good. Maybe they got in a fight with somebody else, right? There's lots of different interpretation choices. It's not always about us. And then stop comparing yourself and your successes to others, right? That idea of real life versus social media. What success means to you is something different to someone else. And what's good luck? Preparation, opportunity, and what you do next. And then finally, give yourself grace. None of us are perfect. Sometimes we need to give ourselves a little bit of self-compassion, but over time, all these things are skills that you can really practice. And, so at the end of the day, you can really achieve that wheel of harmony that fits best for you. So that's the end of our SET presentation today. Thanks again for coming. And so we have some time. So Pam, my partner, is going to be moderating some questions for us.
And before we bring Pam on, I want to say thank you. We will now begin our Q&A session. If you would like to submit a question, please use the Q&A window on your screen. One moment, please, while we wait for our first question.
Well, hi there, everyone. And Erin, we do have loads and loads of questions here from your presentation. The first one comes from Carolyn. These are all great ideas, Erin, but what do you do if your supervising lawyer or partner in your firm doesn't subscribe to these ideas? What should I do?
I mean, I think, I get asked this a lot. I was actually just on a panel where we were talking about this. And, I think, a couple different things. At the end of the day, unfortunately, sorry, I think I'm getting a little feedback. We can't necessarily, change the people that we're working with, the people that we're working for. So, I think it could be helpful, even in your office, is there another ally that you can find, to connect with on this? And also just recognizing, what are some things that you can personally do to, make things a little bit more harmonized and, better for you? Like, can you get in sometimes some of those smaller pockets of self-care? when I was listening to a talk recently, there was a doctor on it with a bunch of lawyers, and she said, because in the medical profession, and I've done some work with doctors, they have crazy schedules like us. And, she said, I always tell the younger doctors, that they've got to also, try to find ways that they can make some changes for themselves. So, I would again see if there any way, culturally in your firm, there's other people that you can align with, and also what are some things, that you can just personally do to add, a little bit of more of this wellness, to your everyday life.
Another question we have from Eugene. If you see a fellow lawyer who you think is struggling with stress or another problem, do you have a suggestion how to connect with that person or how to offer help to that person?
Yeah, I think sometimes if we're afraid, really to kind of talk to people about this kind of stuff, which I understand, right? Especially in in the organizations that we work in. I mean, I think the best thing sometimes is just to, talk to somebody and say, how you doing? And, if they kind of just say, fine, I'm okay, right? We know those aren't necessarily great answers when we answer like that. There's probably more going on. I would encourage you to, circle back with them. Can we kind of try to develop that conversation a little more? And even sometimes just saying, well, you don't really seem like you're fine to me. And, it's okay if you don't want to talk about it right now, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm here for you. And if there's anything that I can do. I mean, I think sometimes just recognizing that, when someone recognizes our pain and that we're struggling, maybe they're not ready to talk about it in the moment, but they can circle back. But I think it's really important that we kindly and empathetically, acknowledge it. While, we might not be able to relate exactly to what they're going through, we can still be there for them. And of course, if you ever have anyone in your office that you think is really struggling, with substance use or, a severe mental health disorder, I mean, that might be a time too. I don't know what your procedure is in your offices that you kind of want to, alert your HR person, your wellness person that, something needs to be done, because sometimes, people notice things and we don't always say it. So I think that's really great that you're kind of thinking about how can I reach out and help somebody.
Excellent. And we have Stephen asking here, do athletes, musicians, dancers, or others with these kinds of significant hobbies, do you find that they are better able to handle stress? Lawyers who have these kinds of hobbies?
I do think that when you find ways, and I really think about this as joy, right? So what are things that bring you joy? I think when we can tap into things that bring you joy, that you are better able to handle stress and you're able to find fulfillment, right? So maybe for somebody, it is like dancing, or taking an art class. One of my partners here used to play hockey when he was younger, and is in a hockey league and gets together with his friends and gets exercise. And whenever he talks about it, I could tell he's having, he's very happy, and it brings some joy to him. So I think what I would say is, if you're thinking about what's a good way for me to de-stress, I think finding something that is going to make you smile and bring you some joy can help with the stress management stuff.
Great. And then how do you say no gracefully to social invitations from friends when you're simply trying to set personal boundaries, but you don't want to sound like you're making excuses or offending somebody?
I think, just saying to somebody, oh, thank you so much, for the invite, unfortunately, this just doesn't work right now with my schedule. Please keep me in mind for next time. I think sometimes we feel like we have to say more, and I could get that too, because we are lawyers, right? We're used to feeling like we have to argue with somebody or really explain ourselves. But I think sometimes just being simple about it, and being kind. I really appreciate this invitation. Unfortunately, it's not going to work for me right now. Have a good time. Please keep me in mind for next time. Again, you don't owe somebody a long explanation. And I think just saying it right away is helpful when we're setting boundaries, as opposed to, holding out and waiting. And I always tell people this, and I really personally think it's true too, that if somebody asks you to do something, and maybe let's say it's in 3 months, and you're like, If you wouldn't want to do it right now, if it was like this week, the answer is probably no. So I just think being kind, upfront about that. And if it is somebody who's like a really close friend, just kind of saying, I'm exhausted. I kind of need a break. I mean, people tell me that a lot more now. And I totally get it because sometimes it's not that you don't want to go. It's just when you look at that whole wheel of harmony, everything you've got going on, we only don't have so much time.
Great. Questions are still coming in here, and so I'm going to try to combine a few here from a few people.
Great.
There's several coming in about the best way to deal with clients who either constantly ignore your advice or who are angry or depressed. And I know they said of self-control and resilience, but do you have any tips as to how to deal with these kinds of clients who can be sometimes difficult? Hear
Yeah,
from
I
you,
mean, I think
Professor.
it's kind of like twofold, right? Like if you know that you have a difficult client that you have to get into a meeting with, what can you kind of do? And I like to think of this as like bookmarking. So like because you can, again, like, right, there was that quote in here, I can't control them, right? And we all deal like, right, with clients that, are really suffering. Most people don't contact us when they're having a good day. So, but we can kind of regulate ourselves. So like if you're going to go into a meeting or you have to do a phone call, is there something you can kind of do before, to set yourself into a grounding mood, like listening to a song, like taking some deep breaths, and then after you have the meeting, is there something again that you can do to ground, like something that brings you joy after you get done, or again, maybe doing one of those grounding activities, and I think, just really trying to, shift that mindset of, this person is clearly struggling. It's not about me. I'm going to try to be empathetic, right, and put myself in their shoes. But unfortunately, all we can really control is ourselves. So I think it's really important in those situations to really practice our stress management skills, our grounding skills, before and after that we have those encounters. And of course, if we do have a client that if you're concerned about them, is there a way for you to kindly just provide them, with some resources?
And I think we're running out of time here, so we do have one last question. And it comes from Rich, who's asking, do you have any wellness tips from your dad? And I know you've had a real impact, Erin, on your dad. And I think he's answered a couple of his tips. You probably already know them in the chat there to end the program here. And I'm sorry, we can't get to all the other questions. There's a lot of others.
I mean, some wellness tips from my dad. I have to tell you, when I was writing, I'm working on this book right now, and when I was writing, like kind of some of the Wheel of Harmony stuff, I really thought about my father because I think he has had so much fulfillment in his life because he's been really good at weaving those different domains together. He works really hard just as much as he did when I was a kid. But he also makes a lot of time for family and the grandkids. He does things that bring him joy. He takes care of, he's always taking care of his health. And he really contributes. He loves to, mentor the next generation and keep up with the times, with the technology, learn new things. So I think really looking at your wheel and saying, hey, like, how can I kind of weave some stuff together is a really wonderful way, to find fulfillment throughout your life.
Well, thank you so much, Erin. That was excellent and very insightful, all of your hard work and your passion about this topic. And as well as, of course, as you said, you learned from your dad as well. And so that would conclude today's program. And we thank all of you for attending. And we have a message for you now. Thank you again.
That concludes today's presentation. A link to the certification process will appear in a moment. There we go. It should now be appearing. Please take the time to request your certificate as soon as possible. This link will also be emailed to you tomorrow morning. On behalf of all of us here at Clifford Law Offices, we thank you for attending and we hope to see you next year.